Okay, we're trying this. First off, I apologize for my voice and my what will for sure be coughing and snorting and sniffling and stuff because I think I'm on the mend. I'm recovering, but I have been sick all weekend, which has been a bummer. It's been a bummer. I'm just a Midwest metagelical talking about God and other hypotheticals. It's a catchy riff, Chandrick. Um, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to click on one of my streams. If you're not familiar with either me or this little corner of the internet or anything like that, and I'm like you'd probably just click right away, which is why it's a feature and not a bug. And this is why it's a steep slope in getting into my streams or the TLC, because it basically just automatically filters out a lot of people. I'm not gonna say everybody who clicks away I wouldn't want to hear and participate, but it very much filters out people who are beholden to being attention slaves of the algorithm and the feeds and just whatever pops up and they click away. Like, who was talking about that the other day? Metrics. I think it was Sam, maybe PVK, of like how long somebody watches their stream. But PVK was saying they actually look at comments as one of the most valuable things. Yeah, because that's participation. Like, I don't want mindless attention. I want participation. I want people leaving comments. I want people interacting. I want people breaking the fourth wall. I want people coming on and engaging. I want oppositional processing. I want affirmation agreement. I want us all learning how to think and process together and sharing personal details. Although the public forum of YouTube live streams is not the most conducive to sharing the most important personal things, I guess. C-Bucks! Thank you. Thanks, Jeffrey. So yeah, what is communion? Gabe keeping me on track. So this I don't know. This is very similar to one of Jeff's questions from a long time ago, many ages ago, ages of ages in terms of TLC lore, because a day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as a day. So in TLC lore, years ago, many years ago, before live streaming, I think it was maybe in the first multi-person conversation that we had on Randos United, and that Paul also posted to his channel. So I think it was Jeff, Job. Was it just you, me, and Job? I think so. And PVK. Thank you for the comments, buddy. But I think you asked the question, what is a Christian? Great question. It's a great question. But then I think another conversation is like, what is communion? Because this came up in the Emergent church conversation with Trip and Sam and Sarah and I. Sam, that contrarian, he's just like, I'm not doing the estuary protocol. He was so defiant to the end. And then he brought in, did he bring in Moises's comments? He wasn't even sticking to the people in the panel. It was hilarious. Like, in that sense, like, it's a kind of rebellion that I don't know. I'm a weird mix because, like, I totally support Sam doing that. He can do whatever he wants, obviously. But I'm just like, it's a little bit, Sam, I will say this to you. I would say this to your face too. It's a little bit of being, it's slightly dishonoring to your guest, to your host, which was Paul Vanderklay in that realm. It's his platform, his thing, his stream, play by his rules. Where's the line there? Playing by the rules and hospitality. I don't know. If you exclusively play by the rules, it's probably the closer. If you are too, so I'll reference my boy C Money, Charlie, who may pop into the stream. I sent him the link early because we've been talking off camera now, off of live streams, because I really enjoyed riffing with him the other day. but he sent me something where he's been talking about this kind of he was talking about Christianity, Taoism, but this kind of hyper structuralism, hyper order stuff, which I've often equated to hyper conservatism. Is yes, Nick Freewheelian, yes, Chesterton and Chesterton's fence. Which is essentially like if there's a fence in a field, the conservative will ask the question of like why, like you're walking through the countryside in England and you come across a stone fence in a field and you're like, why is this fence here? What a dumb fence. It's in my way. We should tear it down. That's what I would say the unwise liberal impulse may be. Perhaps the progressivist impulse. The conservative impulse is like, let's figure out what this fence is for and then maybe tear it down or not. That whole thing is caging conservatism in a very positive light, which there's wisdom there, but there's also wisdom in structure in and of itself. Structure per se is not a good, because you get into authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Hyperstructure, like the Borg, can become very detrimental to being in life because you do not have a kind of renewing, resurgent, the hero's journey, leaving the structure, going out into the chaos to bring the gold back for the structure, or not harvesting the fringe. If we're talking about centers and peripheries, there's wisdom in not harvesting the fringe. There's wisdom sometimes in going outside the camp, outside the walls. So anyhow, that's the structuralism piece. So what is a Christian? What is communion? Because this came up in the Emergent podcast. Again, we're going back. Because Paul, Sherry poked at Paul at Northwestuary, and I think she asked the question, like, is this church? And Paul, he's like, he has his confessional boundaries. He's a minister. He has to be careful, discerning, wise in what he says. Okay, but this will get back. I was gonna look for it and put it in the description here. By the way, I'm streaming this on Rumble because I don't want to pay for an X premium account, a monthly subscription. I don't want to do that. And I want to have, because YouTube still has not, like my video with Sam, like where Sam and I talk about the telepathy tapes, it's still blocked. I appealed it and I thought they approved the appeal and it was all okay. But then somehow in my YouTube studio, I went and looked at it. I posted this to Twitter. It's still blocked because the appeal was denied on December 11th or something. And I played the clip. It's on X, on my account on X, the clip which was Sam and McMo talking. And it's silly. It's silly pants. YouTube, look at it again. Whoever the person is who upheld that flag, do your job better. Get better at your job. I strongly disagree. That's not the kind of stuff you want to be protecting us from. Because again, your safetyism will, in trying to protect us from that kind of speech, is going to lend you into a kind of thought policing that is a hyperstructuralism that will kill oppositional processing and dialogos, and it's anti-American. It's anti-logos in a lot of ways. If you believe that the logos is part of what proper communication lends to, and then you'll be stuck in a kind of siloed ideological solipsism, which is going to be bad for everyone. It might be the kind of death and collapse which is not redemptive into a spiral resurrection. It might just be a total death. So I had a video, though, this is connected to what is communion, where I wanted to I was talking about what is the church, and I was riffing off of one of my local friends. What are we doing here? Oh, Sam, you just did a commentary on David Bentley Hart's something. So I don't know if it's in my live or it's in my videos. Sometimes I can't find things because I don't know what I titled it. But I think it's on What is the Church? Shoot. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I don't think it's in my live stuff. It might, well, it must be in my live stuff. I don't think it's in my regular video. Stop! Didn't mean to click it. I'm just a Midwest metagelical. Um, but my conception of the church is a very deep symbolic reality in the Christian understanding that has many layers. It's a fractal reality that has but I think in the broadest sense, and I think this was riffing on okay, I want to find it now. Sorry about me. Looking, this is bad YouTubing. What was it? It was it before I Am Leviathan, Slow Growth, The Thing Behind the Thing, Non-Dualism. Infundibular interiority? No. Peer review? No. What was it? I think it was before the 15. I think it might have been before the 15-hour live stream and the 24-hour live stream things. Before the jouissance stuff. Should orthodoxy be evangelizing? That was another stream I had an idea for. Maybe this. Was it speculative theology? Folk academia? What is the church? Actually, here we go. I'm going to post it. It was What is the Church? It's not that long. And it has way fewer views than I'm getting now, so maybe people need to go back and revisit it. But I will post it in the in the current thing if I can. How do I get there? Really sorry about this. I'll get back to it. Okay. Here, I'm posting it. If you guys want to watch it. I'll maybe edit. Yeah. Since I'm not doing the simul stream to Grail Country, I can go back and edit it and just put it in my notes of this. So what is the church? So it's riffing off of, I think it's Colossians. Should I go get a Bible? The very beginning of Colossians, where St. Paul says, I'm gonna have to get water too, where it says, where he talks about, it's the modern, or the not modern, the Orthodox liturgy also talks this way, but it talks about who called you out of non-being into being. And the liturgy uses that line, who's called into being out of non-being, which is obvious, which is, if you're biblically literate, it's a reference back to Genesis when the Spirit was hovering over the waters of the deep, right? The chaos. And out of non-being, the chaos, the dark, the unknown, the whatever that is, out of the non-being of chaos, called something into being. And it's distinction, it's delineation, it's separation of waters, it's all that stuff. So it's a being called into being out of non-being. Potential into potency, into actuality, perhaps. Chaos into some structured order. But there's a relationship there, right? Life and death. So in the broadest sense, the church is what is. It's being itself. It's the cosmos. It's it's all those things. And so there's another line that we say during Lent, which we say, Christ the only existent one. And so in a sense, you could say Christ is all that exists, and then whatever is united to Christ, which would be his bride, which is the church, which is we wait eagerly for the redemption of the sons of God, the fullness of the church to come into being, and then the church will redeem the rest of the cosmos and creation, which is the totality of the eternal Christ, perhaps. And so back to what is communion. There's a father, what is the guy's name? The book, Communion as Being. What is that book? Father, come on, book. Yes, Father. No, it's not. He's not. He's just a theologian. He's not a priest. John, this guy. Here, share screen. Communion as Being. Here we go. John. Come on, Greek. Zizulos? Zizulos? Ups. What is that? Tell me what it is. But being as communion. So, I mean, essentially what that's talking about is that to commune is being, which is essentially the same thing as saying relational ontology. Relation precedes relata. Relation is more fundamental than the emergent structure from the relating itself. I was trying to talk about this with T-Grog in Twitter, and we were essentially talking about monarchical Trinitarianism because I was talking about, it was my tweet on retweeting something. Who's a Catholic thinker, I guess, and I was saying, because it was on Sola Scriptura, and I was saying the text per se does not exist. And why? Because of communion, because of relational ontology, because the text always needs a context, what is surrounding the text. Or you could say it's like the white page of the Torah, you know, like just the text of the Torah per se doesn't exist. It exists in the medium that it is manifesting, the womb and the seed. And then that seed has potential when it is perceived, received with, all revelation works that way. Revelation is a seed that then has potency and takes seed and is awakened, because you receive it with meekness, the implanted word, and that seed is awakened in your consciousness, in your perception, and then you can do something with it. This is why the separation of belief into just abstracted ideas, mere potency, rather than actuality, misunderstands communion as being and the church as becoming. Sam actually touched on that in his podcast of like ascending to the heavens, when he was calling out, or disagreeing with, maybe not calling out, the Lord of Spirits guys when they were talking about, because what was it? Sam, you maybe not here, but in that podcast you were talking about I need to go look at the comment now. Sorry, I'm pulling too many things together, but this is all related. It's a mosaic. Follow it. Follow the mosaic. Follow the yellow brick mosaic. Follow the yellow brick mosaic. Be authentically preserved. That's Sam. Okay, what was my comment? Yeah, the service updates. I can't remember what doctrine it was, but at like 121:58, he said the Lord of Spirits, they want to say that, oh, because there was a point in there. This is very applicable to all this. Many comments by Yosef. Yosef was there. Yeah, at 106:40, he was playing the Lord of Spirits podcast, and they were suggesting that salvation now works differently because there was a revelation, right? And I can't remember the particulars of what theological point they were pointing at. But I said, you're still smuggling belief as merely propositional. And I said, this is the kind of mechanistic, systematic confessionalism that isn't copacetic to Eastern Orthodox. Sorry, I don't think it is. Because they were saying that once this was revealed at whatever council, I think they were talking about Nicaea at that point, then to not believe that is to be a heretic, because they were saying before that it wasn't an issue. You didn't have to believe that, and you could be a Christian. But now that God had revealed that through the council, then you had to believe it to be a Christian. But you're still talking about belief as this mere potential, as like propositional belief, which denies a big thing that the TLC is all working on. What does it mean to believe? And Jordan Peterson's act as if, because you're saying that belief, I think you're essentially forming into like the worst you're falling back into like the worst forms of Gnosticism. And I'm not going to speak about Gnosticism broadly because I don't understand it well enough. But the kind of Gnosticism that says belief is just a propositional affirmation of a syllogism and mere abstraction. But all that is potency. I've said this for years. Propositional belief per se, in and of itself, apart from the other 4 P's, is just potential. But Christian belief is actuality. It's incarnation. It's becoming. And so back to T. Grogan. Okay, back to the tweet. Sola Scriptura. The text needs a context. The text in and of itself as a monad, without being perceived and as a seed coming into your consciousness and being perceived so that it can be actualized, doesn't exist. It's just pure potency. It doesn't have any actuality. It needs to become the living word within you. Receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. And so, so the text is that way, but also God the Father, the monadic God the Father, which I don't believe in, doesn't exist per se. This is a disagreement. Well, this is a thing. This is one of Nate and I's disagreements that we've had over the years. And he says that I'm using a univocal understanding of to be, what it means to be. But God the Father, the monarchical Father, per se, doesn't exist because he's just a monad. It's the same as the Big Bang before creation. There wasn't even time. Before the Big Bang decided to become everything. But that has to be at least potential. And potential implies actuality. Potential apart from actuality is nothing. If potentiality, if what's it called? I always forget this. If the singularity before the Big Bang, and I'm just talking about logically before, because there is no actual before, because it's just a monad, so there is no time, because you don't have the cosmos. So it's a logical before. If it is not potency, it's nothing. You can't even talk about it. You can't do anything about it. It's nothing. It's technically nothing, but it's the kind of nothing that wouldn't even actualize, because otherwise, if it actualizes, then it was a potency, and it's not a mere and it's not an isolated monad. God the Father is the exact same thing. God, this is what the church is talking about when it says the Logos is eternally existent. Now, is there a before creation? But see, even then, is there a before creation where there's a Father and a Son and a Holy Spirit? Eternally existence in the ages and ages before creation. Well, yeah, then it's a logical before, and it's a kind of logical before that has the same kind of potency as the singularity. So, so in the same way, because T-Grog came back and said something like, so God doesn't exist. And I'm like, yes, exactly. You get it. Yes, God per se doesn't exist. In the same way that the singularity doesn't exist, unless it's all the stuff I was just talking about. Okay. So communion is being. It's participating in being and participating in becoming. So when TLC, when we're talking about ideas, when we're talking about tile, when we're talking about Tayo, when we're talking about music, when we're just shooting the shit, when we're joking, when we're making music in a chill stream, when Neil is talking about evolution, when Stephen D20 is talking about Noah or altars or winemaking or whatever, when Jonathan Demir is talking about astrology, when Grail Country is talking about all the things that it talks about, when Jacob Federecci is talking about psychology and Fountain of Comfort, when Mark Navigating Patterns is talking about how he's made a video about everything that's important about what everyone's talking about, and if they watch their video, they would understand all things, know all things, believe all things. When all those people are talking about all the things they're talking about, when Noah's talking about gaming, who else have I missed out? When Afriel and Harris and whomever else are talking about 30 by 30. When CC Mule is talking about the stuff she talks about. Karen Wong, when she's talking about with the intellectuals that she's talking to. When PVK is doing his, I'm a failed pastor and I have ADHD. When we're all talking about all this stuff, what are we talking about? And this is why we're maybe going to need a move to the creative, because here's the honest and true critique of TLC. If all we're doing is talking and it never becomes actuality, it never becomes an instantiated reality in the world where we are doing things either artistically, either maybe even doing a play, maybe a play within a play, David Busatil, maybe having estuaries, having local conferences, maybe people coming together and starting companies, maybe people networking and creating work, maybe people creating video games, maybe people meeting other people and getting married and having babies. That looks a hell of a lot like being. So TLC isn't just talking, it's all these things. But if TLC then is doing the things that lend toward being, isn't that communion as being? Isn't that church what is being called out of nothingness and mere potentiality into being? Now you might say the pushback is going to be, well, there are no sacraments. There is no Eucharist. The church can't even agree on that stuff. What is it true presence? Is it apostolic succession and handed down with authority of binding and loosing? Is Protestant communion communion? What is communion? Nico obviously disagrees. But what is communion then, Nico? You know, what's going on with all this? Okay. I think I'm going to cap it there, and I'm going to post the link, and I am going to leave in about a half hour. So maybe, I know my boy Jess might come in. I know perhaps Charlie might show up. I don't know. I don't know if he wants to talk about this. We might just maybe, Charlie, feel free to come on, see money. Maybe we can just do a recorded conversation, which isn't a live stream. Feel free to come on and we can talk about this, but we can also do a separate conversation about the particular things that you were talking about, which are awesome. People can come in and push back. We could talk about anti-intellectualism. We can talk about when, because here's the thing. Here's something I encourage anyone who comes on not to do. Don't do the like what Cal says, mystery for me, not for thee, or intellect for me, but not for thee. Because like I can have my opinions and so can you. That's fine. You can disagree with me, but I don't have to agree with you. All right. What up, Alan?
Yo, what's up, Luke? Confirming everyone, I do actually live in New York City. So,
Prove it. Go talk to somebody and have them be rude to you.
Yeah. I just want to jump on here because I'm getting into the office. The thing from that, like, Paul put out a banger of a video, which is just like splicing together some things about the estuary, from the one you were referencing. And yeah, the thing I guess I wanted to talk about, and it has to do with your being, non-being, not divorcing it from the four P's, not divorcing the propositional. Like, I mean, I don't know if this is rude to say, but it definitely seems to be this emergent movement in the TLC of like, well, no, like all this was great and estuary was great and all the meetups were great, but like really there's an intellectual movement going on here, and really they're gonna write down everything we said here, and like, it's partially universalism, and it's partially this, and like it's all these ideas that are being squeezed out of our brains here. And I'm just like, no, wrong, bad. Like people who don't even show up to the like in-person events will then just say like, well, it's just like, oh, it's these ideas, and like, bucking the structure of like the online estuary and being like, let's get to the talking part, and like, like that's insane. It's like, like I want to get to the part where I want to talk. It's like the whole point of TLC is this like communion, and like to then buck against it and be like, no, the idea is like we're wasting time by being nice to one another. We need to talk. These ideas are so important. They need to get out there. It's like, what are you talking about? Like you know, this idea that like, oh, there's something going on here that's so important and only I see the picture. So I just see that subculture coming out and like whatever. I mean, I have, you know, an estuary, I have a church community, I have lots of places to go. But I also think that ties in nicely as an explanation as to why people are like, well, I can't go to church. It's like, well, if you can't follow the rules of an online estuary, how the hell can you be a member of a church?
Whoa,
You know?
Sam, take notes, write it down.
Well, just like, what are you talking about? Like, I hate it here. Like, no one's asking me what my philosophy is. This sucks. Like, oh my goodness. Like, dude, Grandma Jane, who's like 90 years old and wants to give you a hard candy, doesn't need a lecture on Jordan Peterson or non-dualism or whatever. She, you know, just be nice.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're not making like an anti-intellectualism point. Because here's the thing. Like I'm against propositionalism. I'm against beliefism, but I'm all about propositions. And I think some are better than others. And I will talk about ideas and propositions, but that's not the core nature of this thing.
well, yeah, I agree. And I also think like that was never like the idea of like Paul Vanderklay was like, you know, really, I just think that there are these ideas out there that I'm going to build this structure, and this whole structure around me is sort of this tool that I'm building to get to these propositions. And really, all these friendships, all these in-person events, those are great, but really, it's just to hook up enough CPUs that are our brains. And once we
Yeah.
hook up enough of these genius brains, we'll be able to mine out the diamonds, which are the propositions. And you know, we just don't have the CPUs hooked up, which are our like soft brains. So if only
Yeah.
all the smart people would just get together and they would if they would just keep talking to each other, if we could just get ChatGPT to talk to itself long enough, it would solve all
Yeah.
the mysteries of the world. It's like, okay,
If we can
fine,
get
like,
Rogan saved, Jordan Hall talk more, if we can get Eric Weinstein in here, because smart will save us. We know
yeah.
this, right?
So I know I'm popping off, but like it's just like it's great. I'm like, this was started with people being like friendly and nice. And I remember Chino, California. I remember Olympia, Washington. I remember people who are sort of like, I don't even know what this is about, having a great time. People's, you know, husbands or wives who've never even seen a video. I want them to enjoy an in-person event. I don't want them to be like, well, here's the book, read up so you can participate. Read
Yeah.
up, lady. You don't know what a non-dualist universalist metagelical is? Like, what is wrong with you? It's just like,
Alan,
what
do
do
you
you
remember when we lined up people at Northwestuary by IQ and then you went and you pushed down everyone to the ground who
yeah.
didn't have an IQ of 120 or higher?
Yeah, I was just like, hey, well, it was rate limiting. It's like
Yeah,
you at a 105 IQ, you can say 200 words today. So pick
that's
them
right.
carefully. And
Yeah,
then I was like 110, and then me is like, I'm probably clocking in at like 195, 200.
yeah.
I just like wrote myself a free check to talk as much as I want. So,
Well, that's a smart.
um,
I mean, you are the glass ceiling. I mean,
yeah,
anybody that you can understand is clearly less intelligent than you. So you
yeah,
have to set the caps.
it's like Mohs hardness scale. Like a diamond is the hardest object, so all other objects' hardness is related to the hardness. So my intelligence is how you rate other people's intelligence. So I'm the ultimate, like super genius, undeniable. So everyone else's intelligence needs to be like measured against mine. All
C
right.
Money, what do you think? Tayo clearly disagrees with Alan.
Well, that's because Pyro's a 105 IQ.
Um,
Oh,
I,
snap.
I wanted to bring up something you said. The stuff that I had sent you the other day was interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And the initial impetus for what I was writing was this idea that Christ was born from a virgin. And so a lot of times we come across these scriptures or these parables or these ideas, and they don't fit the rational, objective way that we understand the world. And so for us modern folk to hear a metaphor or a scripture that holds that Christ was born from a virgin, we think, well, a man can't come from no sperm or whatever, and so that breaks our laws of understanding. And so I was trying to explain what that might mean and how we might make sense of that, and how that might actually have some embedded wisdom in it, despite being obviously rationally wrong. What might the meaning be? How, like, if this is written and this is supposed to guide social interaction, what could potentially be the significance? How do we make meaning out of it? What does that matter to us? something that's completely absurd and doesn't fit the fluency of our language seems to not matter, but yet we're told it does matter. So I was trying to make sense of that. I was trying to help that out. And then today in the comment section, I saw that Dave W. said, being a bride of Christ is a female gender role in which all Christians are called to fulfill. And I thought that sort of, and then that related to what I have keep quoting Luke of, with meekness inherit the implanted word. And so there's something about being an open spirit that isn't possessed by a propositional framework that then permits like an underlying feminine potency of energy that has yet to be determined, that then you can communicate with somebody else and you can receive an implanted word, and then you can become structured like something else. But if you are already onto something, if you already believe in a proposition, if your personality is already structured, then you're not necessarily receptive to that new information. And then therefore with meekness, with arrogance, you are not receiving the implanted word. And so you can't cast pearls before swine. Like the information is not in the words itself. It's in the audience's ability to interpret or to manifest or to make meaning or to make matter out of that structure of the spell. Like it's an engagement process. And so I just thought that was interesting and wanted to throw that up there, given that the TLC is mostly a masculine space of propositional ideas. What might be the benefit of a feminine space of potential, of which you can communicate, ingrain the Christ-like spirit, transform, and become more in harmony to that transcendent better? Something like that. But it's by going in reverse. It's by not having an idea. It's by shutting up. It's by quieting.
Yeah.
McGilchrist says the first step of God was to withdraw. And so, like, how do you create this withdrawal? How do you depotentiate, or how do you deactualize yourself to potentiate yourself to then grow forward? And that's like a discipline. That's like a humility. That's like an anti-ego sort of thing. And that's kind of painful and excruciating, pun intended. And so,
Kenosis.
yeah. Sorry, I'll shut up now. Thank you.
No, I think that's very good. Which is why I keep coming back to hospitality too. And that's like what I said to Paul in the Emergent talk, quoting Tyler Anderson from really early TLC days. The church, the modern, a lot of times evangelical church, but broadly church, is a masculine space with feminine language when it should be a feminine space.
I actually wrote that down too. I wanted to bring that up at some point.
That's exactly what you're talking about, because that's any space that is truly hospitable and generative, where seeds can grow into where you can cultivate a garden. It has to be a feminine space. It has to be.
And I think that's Nietzsche's whole "the death of God" thing, is that the cultural soil of civilization is no longer fertile for seeds to sprout. And so you can't practice relating to that Christ energy. So then that Christ energy never grows. And then you never have that good, conscious, imaginal God image relationship that allows you to transcend. And therefore people are cowardly and weak and give up. And so like the culture no longer provides us the ability to engage and grow the God relationship within us to empower us to confront chaos. And so I think that's very similar. Sorry.
No, totally. Mark, I want to hear what you have to say. And also, Nico, I don't know how many times, like this criticism, I've addressed 100 times, and it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how many times I address it. People are just going to keep saying it. I said it already once in the stream. I'm not anti-propositions. I'm anti-propositionalism. It's a different thing. And if you can't understand what the difference is there, I'll just keep saying it and you'll keep not hearing it.
Yeah, that actually brings me to a comment in our last time that we were talking. I was basically saying that the point of philosophy is to reach aporia, or the point of reasoning your way through something is to realize that your reasons are eventually irrational. And by irrational, I mean it's the improper ratio of reason to embodiment. And so that's some sort of confusion that we all do. And so I was trying to say that the point of philosophy is to realize that only being reasonable in itself is irrational. And so, yes, you use these structures to orient yourselves. But if you then orient yourself to the structure, then that's you're denying yourself image in that. And so there's something about Homo sapien as a man that is motivated by a sapiential framework. And so there's something about using propositions that we somewhat need to orient us. But if we make the mistake of valuing the proposition more than the spiritual interpretation, then we are in the sticky temptation to fall into deception, something like that. And so if the point of philosophy is to realize you're wrong, well, then why would you ever start? And to me, that's an antidote to the modern left hemispheric possession, the modern Luciferian intellect, the modern fall from grace, the modern Tower of Babel. And so that's your communion. We all get into our modern towers of Babel in our own isolated propositions, and then we let go of that to come into a communal space and allow the receptive and the modification. And so there's some sort of balancing of propositional and potential and structured and unstructured. Unfortunately, with our sapiential frameworks, we have to structure. And so that is very tempting to the audience to hear structure and then say, oh, this man is preaching structure. And that's what he's preaching against. And it's like, well, that's kind of the medium of the message, but that's not the spiritual intent. And so there's a sort of moral burden on the audience to try and get at the spiritual intent of the letters, not the letter of the law itself, but the spirit behind the letter of the law. Something like that?
Yeah, I very much agree with all that. But now I want to not keep asserting and recede my hospitality and see what Mark has to say.
Luke, I feel your pain. Well,
are you still in
still on the
Cheyenne?
road. I'm out of Cheyenne. Black ice was just an overnight problem for my car, so we got through it. But now I'm in Salt Lake City, and they don't have coffee in the lobby. I cannot. I pay $120. They don't have coffee in the lobby. I mean, I'm sorry,
Mark. That's so funny.
I'm in Mormon purgatory, or is it hell? It's a travesty.
You spoke about the other day how like you haven't had a good cup of coffee in days, and I was feeling your pain because I love coffee. And when you are, so I lived in Washington State for a while, and so when you move from like Minneapolis has many good coffee shops, many. But like if you're traveling out, like until you get to, I don't know, Tacoma or maybe like Seattle, like there's no good coffee shops. It's all like if you go. I go to a place, I know, I can see the squeeze bottles that they have at espresso shots. And I'm like, I don't want your coffee. I want nothing to do with what you're doing. Give me your Folgers. I would drink your Folgers drip way before I would ever drink that. It's so hard. Anyhow.
Yes, that's such suffering. Oh my goodness. I must bless them even though they cursed. I'm kidding. You said several provocative things, but I'll just go skip all those. And I want to explore your most often quoted passage of Scripture, receive with meekness the implanted word, taken from James, correct?
Right. And right before that, it's talking about what? Holiness, embodiment, putting aside the fleshly things.
Living out the faith, right?
Yeah.
That's what he's. I mean, it's you see, my faith my faith produces works. As again, that's his. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so but just to the phrase, I think I would like to meditate on the word meekness.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. That's a big one.
Sure.
And when I started to do that, I went to the story, or it was the admonition Jesus gives the disciples. He says, when you're invited to a wedding feast, don't assume the high spot. Take the lowest place take a seat at the kids' table.
Mm-hmm.
And which would be equivalent, say, take the place of a slave. We changed the screens. And that, I think that I'm trying to ground the word, because and to me that for Jesus, that does it for me. That image that just like says, oh, now that's because it's a posture, it's a mindset, it's a because you guys are, I mean, you're flying at a pretty high altitude here.
Yeah,
a lot of big ideas.
I think a distinction in the identity of self might be helpful here. What do you mean by yourself? And so when you say, I myself am going to be a slave to God, or I'm going to submit to God, or I'm going to sacrifice my individual worldview to communicate with my society or my tribe.
Okay. Can I take a shot at it?
Sure. Yeah.
Luke said that the Father doesn't exist. Okay.
This is it's a thought experiment.
Not
I
in
don't
an
believe
objective
Oh,
way.
yeah, you were playing with
It exists as
Tigran.
spiritual orientation, though.
Right. Well, apart from wondering, who Jesus was talking to then, in John 17, for example, you have to, let's just say, the better question, the way I might play that thought experiment would be to say, what exists outside of the Father? So if there's a self, what is, as a Buddhist, I have no problem saying there's no self.
Perfect.
You cannot find any concrete self. No, in the same way you cannot find any absolute, any pure example
can I make a
of free
contrast
will.
to East and West here? I think that the East would agree with you from the Buddhist perspective that there is no self. And I think the West almost presumes the self as the center of experience. And so what the emergent property of the illusory sense of self-control, the Buddhists see as an illusion. Whereas the Western people take their egoic sense, emergent illusion of self-control, as they take that for granted. And so then they assume themselves as the ego. They assume themselves as the monkey mind. And so then the process is going on their head. They confuse for their own thoughts. And they don't realize that these are actually somewhat oftentimes mimetic transmissions. So it's not actually them that's thinking. And so there's something that actually captivates the attention and thinks through you. Jung would say it's not just that people have ideas, but also that ideas have people. And so in this certain way, there's a lot of times where your underlying cognition isn't you. And so in a certain sense, Peterson would say that the Marduk drive of the God is not any particular God, but it's the transcendent property. And so it's not any of your facticities, but it's your ability to transition between facticities. And so it isn't your abstracted. Sorry, what?
I don't know what facticity means.
Okay, we'll get there in a second. But oh shit, now I'm lost.
No, dang it! I blew it.
Facticity is the fallen nature of your circumstance. Like you're born into a society and you're just like thrown into a circumstance. And your facticity is your embodied arena. It's like when you're at work, you have to try to do the motivations of the business. Like it's your facticity is your, actually, I don't know how to explain it. I'm terrible with explaining it because I'm so meta conceptual about everything. Yeah. But sorry, where I was trying to get to was the differences between selves. You have like an ego self and you have a self. So in the Jungian sense, an ego is like this illusory amalgamation of social programming that pretends to be the center of cognition. And then the human believes in that imaginary center of cognition. And that's what it means to believe in the Luciferian spirit of illusion, to think of yourself as a separate self. But that would violate the interdependence of the Buddhism, or that would violate the Holy Spirit. And so to identify as wholly separate is to deny that connection. And so if once you think of yourself as an ego, that ego needs to sacrifice itself and die. That ego needs to be a slave. That illusory imaginary pretense that doesn't actually exist needs to let go of the reins of your attention. You can no longer be ruled by that complex that thinks it is in charge. And so that complex that you think of as yourself needs to be enslaved, needs to die, needs to be burned off, needs to be killed. Needs to be
could I just say
and that's actually the way to make a healthier self overall. And then your new self will create new identities. And then those new identities will be better than the old identities you let die off.
You're running with a lot of stuff, money.
Well, I'm trying to answer your question.
The pedals to the metal.
Well, simplified
there's a lot of scenery to take in here. Just slow down a bit. Slow down.
Sorry.
I really liked what Luke kicked in there with powers and principalities. That work within the egoic mind. And see, I have a real hard time finding an ego that's apart from my body. You're speaking of an ego in a very abstract sense, and I'm like thinking, I don't know if such a thing even exists.
That's the point.
This is why I went back to
it's a tempting illusion that takes you down a path of self-deception and self-destruction. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yes.
That's the powers and principalities Luke was studying. Yes? Luke, am I interpreting you right?
Yeah, I think so. And that's the grace of death. Everything that we're talking about here is like, I think it was Sam. I don't know. We made a video a long time ago. It's an old Randall's United video that I talk about that I've mentioned a bunch, but it's what is man that thou art mindful of him? And in there, I was talking about the difference between the isolated autonomous individual, the self, and the divine person. This is why I've always made the distinction between individuals and persons. Because the divine person, I mean, I don't want to go all the way into it, but like I would probably push into a little bit what C Money was saying before. I do think the person is a real thing that has being, but it's not a subjective, objective, divided thing. Right. It's not an egoic thing. Right. It's the Whitestone name.
It's not physically real.
It's not merely physically real.
It has material implications.
Yeah, I'm not
consist of matter.
But I'm not an anti-physicalist because of the incarnation. You know, I'm not a Gnostic.
Fair.
So, anyhow.
Well, I took my shot, guys. That was it. I'm gonna. I'll stick around if you don't mind while you talk for a few minutes. But I want to hear Tayo. And since we got Tayo with us here, and he occasionally visits the House of Woo, we can pray for your sinuses, Luke. Would you like us to pray for you?
I will never turn down prayer.
Absolutely. Okay, Father, we pray for Luke's cold and the virus that has afflicted his body. And we pray, Lord, that you would remove it and cure him and bring him to full health and give him a strong body for the rest of the winter season. Praise the Lord. Amen. All right.
Brother.
Amen. All right. Thanks, guys. I really want to talk to you more, C Money, sometime.
Yeah,
I think the meekness part is great. I actually think that's most of the pushback on the hell conversation is that very thing. It's the meekness. It's
which part of you goes to hell. Yeah.
That, but also just like the way that we talk about it. I think a lot of people had very strong reactions to what was perceived as, let's just grant hypothetically that Christian universalism is true. I think most people were pushing back on that the truth of that revelation is not being received in meekness because of the way that people are talking about it.
Yeah, it could be. And also, too, for me, it came as I worked through it. I finally think I got to what was provoking in me, Luke, with all of that, was that if God is so good that he would not put people in, sorry, Tayo, doggone it.
He can come back if he wants. He has privileges.
If God's so good that he wouldn't condemn souls to hell, well, there are people in hell all over the place. They're in hell now. There are millions, billions of hells, and many of them are completely innocent. They're children born into hell. They're born into hellish households or with afflicted bodies, and they're tortured in unconceivable ways for most of us. And to me, that to me isn't an argument that flies. But see, as I said in my most recent live stream with Ron, in a dialogue, in a big controversy in my local church, I came out as what they thought as a universalist. So I mean, it's how you, because I really believe the book says every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess. I believe it. It says it. I believe it. That's okay. I'm okay with that. So God's going to accomplish it. I don't know how he's going to accomplish it. He'll accomplish it. So it's, but I don't, I'm almost afraid of robbing people of hell.
And I'm not trying to do that.
Well, that's when we, and I know you're not. But when we play with these ideas, we run the risk of layering of suppressing or not dealing with things. Well, Jesus said when the disciples of John, he's in prison, John the Baptist, and they come to Jesus, with the question, are you the one or should we look for another? And what does he say? You know, the prisoners are the people are the demons are being expelled. The sick are being healed. The prisoners are being released. He talks about what he's doing his ministry. He's freeing people, and that needs to be. We need to acknowledge where people are, and use the Spirit of God to liberate them, not just aspirationally say, "Well, the world is really this way." If you know, and this is like I once really had a difficult time. I went through a period where I really didn't believe in the devil at all, right?
Yeah.
And yet I believed firmly in God, but I could not get this person, the person I was speaking to, believed absolutely concretely in the devil. I mean, in the most literal, visceral sense you can imagine, but struggled at every turn to believe in God.
Yeah. Right.
Anyways, I'm rambling. That doesn't probably make any sense to anybody, but
No, that's good.
That actually triggers me to a conversation you've brought up a lot. I think you were talking on some sort of live stream where somebody was talking about the realities of hell, and you said something along the lines of like, God is present everywhere, and where God is present isn't hell. And so you said something along those lines, and then the guy got mad at you and called you a nihilist or something, and said you were denying the realities of hell.
I hate that guy.
And I thought that was the root of the issue. I thought he was trying to use hell as a realistic motivator of human cognition, and then it seemed like your take undermined the validity of that. And then the undermining of validity, I think, is somewhat inherently nihilistic, which is, I think, why he used that word. I think that was the context.
Maybe.
But there's something that triggered me about that. Does that make sense to you, Luke?
It does make sense. Yes. I want to read James 1:21 in some context. Let's read some Bible. Can we do this? Here we go. And then we can talk about it more. Because to your point, you were bringing up receiving all this with humility, which I think is true, but it's also about embodiment. It's not just mere egoic mental cognition, and it's that to the holy all things are holy. To apprehend truth truthfully, you need to be true. Like, that's an aspect of truth. What you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. You will not apprehend truth if you are not a true person.
So can I interrupt you there?
Yeah.
I want to get back to the two different kinds of self, the two senses of self that you've talked about before.
Okay.
And I think in this regard, oh shit, I got lost. That's where the distinction is. It's like, sorry, go back. Sorry, keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right, let's read some of this because that's just, the Bible's great. So I want to start here. So James says, "Don't be deceived, my dearly loved brothers. Every generous act and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. With him there is no variation or shadow cast by turning. By his own choice he gave us a new birth by the message of truth," which is the gospel, "so that we would be the first fruits of his creatures. Hearing and doing." Here we go. This is not part of the Bible. This is just a title. "My dearly loved brothers, understand this. Everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." Look at that. Conversational hospitality. I'm not very good at it. Well, sometimes.
Me either.
"For man's anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. Be angry and do not sin," right? "Therefore, ridding yourselves of all moral filth and evil," literally evil excess, "humbly receive the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." A verse I quote to my children very often. "Because if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man looking at his own face in a mirror. For he looks at himself, goes away, and immediately forget what kind of man he was. But the one who looks intently into the perfect law of freedom and perseveres in it, and is not a wrongful hearer, but one who does good works, this person is blessed in what he does." And then it goes on to like controlling your tongue and stuff, which is fantastic. I mean, a lot of James is about controlling your tongue. I think James 4 isn't that like the big, it's all about controlling your tongue, and you control all things. Like a great ship is controlled by its rudder, you know. So a lot of holiness stuff in there. a lot of put apart, separate all evil and rampant wickedness. Because that's the thing, truly. And this is why Christianity, in a sense, scales. Because like even this stuff, like see money, whether it's me talking in my psycho woo babble that is incomprehensible to almost everyone, or it's you talking like very high level intellectual philosophy. Like I just know because of the nature of bell curves and how it works. And this is why I say
We're just
the intellect,
alienating a ton of people. Yeah.
well, like intellect isn't a virtue. Like it doesn't matter. You can be very smart and be an evil person.
Oh.
But when you talk at a very high level on the bell curve of intellect, it's automatically exclusive. So here's the thing, people. Do hierarchies exist? They do.
Yeah.
And that's going to offend a lot of people because they're like, I can't track with this. I don't know what to tell you. Do you believe in hierarchies or not? That doesn't mean you have to know those things. Be good. Like obey God in whatever way that manifests to you. Receive with meekness the implanted word. You don't have to understand all this philosophy. It only helps you if it helps you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, we have two separate selves, and I keep hyping back to this, but it's the kind of the McGill-Christian sense, the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, or we could talk about Jung, ego and self or whatever. There's the part of our psyche that is built from our memories of our social interactions. And so these parts of our personality are built by mimetic transmission. And the mimetic transmission of the context then like imprints onto our memories. And then we project that context into the future. And that simulation is so close to participation that we confuse that kind of beta thinking with participation. There's a certain way in which the social cognitive frameworks build our unconscious personality. And then the embodiment interprets the world like a pyramid through the energy. And then that comes up with a worldview. And it's that sense of self that is then created that we mistake as our experience. And so that part of us that is mistaken those mimetic memories as ourselves is a fundamental mistake. That is to fall out of at one ment with God. The actual person mixes both the creative energy and the fallen potential. And there's something about that back and forth serpentile energy that is somewhat Luciferian in its propositional sense, but is ultimately driven by an underlying spirit. And the point is the underlying spirit. And that is not the self, which most people think they are. And so unfortunately for most people in the West, they need to sacrifice that sense of self. They need to sacrifice their socialized, egoic, mimetic processes that they've taken for granted. I can't remember the book, but it's called The Four Agreements. And it talks about how we build our personalities based on agreeing to social values. And it's something like we start to identify with the cultural complexes we've agreed to. And then in that sense, we are blind, our spirit is blinded. And so our eyes have eyes to see the propositions being portrayed in front of us, but our spirit doesn't have the imaginary God image relation to manifest the potential out of that structure. And so the actual self that is you is that which can manifest structure, not that which is oriented by structure or confined by structure or delineated by the structure.
You said, Luke, that hierarchies exist. And Simani used the term Luciferian. Jesus again, the first will be last, the last will be first. He seems to, in many passages, to be undermining hierarchies, or at least the hierarchies of this world. So, if that's the case, then if he's undermining hierarchies, if he's the lowest become first, the highest, the hierarchies that we see are probably Luciferian and doomed. So it seems to me like wherever you find yourself, wherever you think you are, keep taking that lowest spot, because even if you get elevated, even if you find yourself moved up a notch or several notches, or you find yourself at the top of the pyramid, and you're Donald Trump or Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk, you damn well better find that low spot and get there quick, because if you don't go there voluntarily and build for yourself treasure in heaven, God's going to do it for you, and you're not going to get any credit.
Right. Well, and I think what's So I very much agree with you. I've actually been thinking a little side project I would like to do is almost just going through and doing a text study on First Corinthians, because I often think like most of the meaning crisis stuff would just maybe, I mean, again, there is no unilateral like fix it, because that's mammon. But like if we just read, I think if people really truly understood the First Corinthians and what St. Paul is getting at, you're going to like, he's talking about all these things. He's talking about the inverted hierarchy of Christianity. And I've often said that the heavenly hierarchy is where the higher serves the lower. So to your point, like what Jesus did and in not exalting yourself, what did Jesus do his whole life? Like they would go to make him king. Anytime he'd say anything that really inspired a bunch of people in like the earthly hierarchy way, he would disappear, or he would go away, or he'd go across the sea. He never wanted to be elevated, ever. The only time he wanted to be elevated was when he set his face toward Jerusalem, and he was elevated.
He didn't want to be mistaken with the spirit that acted through him. And so for his personality to take credit and to take a status or a position or glory for it would be to mistake the point.
Yeah.
To have integrity, he had to not receive the benefit of the beauty that came out of his mouth, because it wasn't him speaking. It was the muse within him or something like that.
Well, but then he did
being received. It wasn't his egoic, socialized mind manipulating.
It's not I speak, but Christ who speaks in me.
Right. That's the
we
two
have
different
two. I could be wrong, but we have, I believe, 2 foot washing scenes in Scripture, and one is the one everyone thinks of with Peter, and Lord, I won't wash your, I won't let you wash my feet. He says, if you don't let me do that, well, you have no part of me.
Right.
And
wash my whole body.
Right. And then you have the other foot washing scene in he's in the household. He's at dinner with Pharisees, and the woman comes in with the perfume, and she washes his feet with her tears, dries them with her hair, and pours the perfume on, which was the closest thing to worship. I don't know if there's, outside of the Mount of Transfiguration, I don't know. That was an act of worship. That was a true scene of elevation, and he praised her for it. So he's not so non-egoic or what. It's a tricky one. The subject you raise, C-Money, because I think Jesus did accept adoration.
Oh, these are such tough. Okay, first thing, I have to do an administrative thing. I am legit gonna go in 7 minutes. So unless you guys want to just keep talking or somebody comes on,
I've got to hit the road too. So I'm sorry if I kept
No. So that's fine. So I'm going to shut it down in 7 minutes. But to your point, I think this is the difficulty with Christ and Antichrist, the spirits of Christ and Antichrist, and genuine humility and like false humility. You see this kind of stuff in church all the time. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of egoic false humility that can deny someone's veneration and acknowledgement of them perceiving like the true spirit of Christ in you. That isn't humility. It's bullshit humility. Yeah. And like there's a kind of, I live in the Midwest. I live in Minnesota. I see this kind of stuff all the time. Minnesotans have the hardest time in the world. I'm not a native Minnesotan, but it's the same in South Dakota. Minnesotans have the hardest time in the world truly accepting a gift. They need to reciprocate in some way. They almost have to. That's pride. Mm-hmm. Guised as humility. It's bullshit. Mm-hmm. Bullshit. Jesus didn't have that.
Yeah. It's insecurity guised as compassion.
Yes.
If you need it to be fair, then you don't trust it to be good.
Yes.
Like if you need your rational ego to make it equal, well, then it's not a loving, beneficial relationship.
That's
the zero-sum game. It becomes a rivalrous dynamic.
Speaking of that, the kind of egalitarianism that most people talk about nowadays is bullshit. It's not actually about fairness. It's a denial of true hierarchy that actually allows the higher to serve the lower. It's bullshit.
The bittered resentment keeping the
new boss same as the old boss. It's the Who saying. Yeah, that's all they want to do. They just want to trade places.
Then it doesn't matter the particular person holding the position. If that is the if that's the valence landscape required by the person in the position, well, then it doesn't matter who the person is, because if they're acting out the position and the values in of the position are already defined, then the person actually doesn't matter in a certain sense.
All right. I am going to try to exercise my thing as a good host. You guys give last words.
Oh, no.
And I will close out whenever the last of you is done. Thank everyone for coming.
I'm done. I got to hit the road anyways. Thank you, Luke. Thanks for the opportunity to pray for you and listening. But this is good, and I enjoyed talking to you. And
I think we actually covered
Mark, good chatting with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. It's Luke, I love you, and I like to get your little signals once in a while. And I felt bad because I felt maybe I'd quenched the spirit between us.
No.
Back and forth. Speaking
of that, I've been just sick and in general busy, which is why I do these live streams, because they work for me. But I've had in my mind a few times. This is where I think like I'm pretty wooey. Where like when people come up in my mind, I try to just reach out, just anything. I don't think that's random. I actually believe, in God and angels and things. And I think that's kind of like, I don't think there's just some sort of random thing that happens. So like, if I think of you and I'm like, I should reach out, and I didn't do it. And I probably should have. So that's bad.
Okay. You're welcome to be busy. You're a busy man. So, yeah. But I just wanted to make sure that we're good and that it's and I think we are. And it's good talking to you, Steve Money. Man, you got a lot of words. So we'll have to work through those a little at a time some point. But you gotta go half speed. You're talking to an elderly uncle here. He's a little feeble-minded. He's a little gimpy, and you gotta work real slow and nudge it along with us old folks.
We can both practice. I can slow down, you can speed up, and we can meet in the middle. We can communicate. We can practice communicating, hopefully.
That's my last word, guys. God bless.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Part of that's probably the format. Like you said that in the comments, C Money, that live streams are stressful, which I get. We should just have a talk where we can really chill, just work through some of this stuff. That would probably be.
I think I'd be a lot better in that vibe, honestly.
All right.
But yeah, if I can say a last word, I don't want to say last words to wrap up what's already happened, but I would like to express a desire to inspire the future to have more communications like this, whether live or in person or on a stream or whatever. I think the work that we're trying to do here to map out meaningful experience for the TLC is let's just keep moving forward, not looking to the past, something like that.
Amen. Cool. All right. Until next time.
Thanks,
See y'all. Absolutely. Goodbye, everyone.